The night the city drowned in sirens was the same night Alina Reed decided she would no longer live in fear. A girl people often dismissed as quiet, harmless, and too gentle for the world, now carried within her a storm fierce enough to destroy a man who believed he was untouchable. And that man was Inspector Marcus Hale, celebrated officer, decorated hero, and beneath all the badges and praise, a creature carved from arrogance and a hungry disguise as authority. That hunger had followed Alina for months. It began with glances she tried to ignore, then comments disguised as compliments, and finally, threats wrapped in the soft tone of a man who liked pretending he was doing her a favor. Marcus had a kind of ego that felt no guilt, no hesitation, an ego that believed any girl, especially a girl like Alina, should feel lucky to be noticed by him. He had power, he had status, and he thought that meant he owned her silence. But silence is a fragile thing. One day it cracks. Alina's life had always been ordinary, working at her aunt's cafe, studying late into the night, dreaming of becoming an investigator herself. She admired justice, believed in law, believed in men who wore uniforms because they were supposed to be protectors. Marcus shattered every belief she ever held. When he discovered her applying for the police academy, he laughed, called her too soft, then whispered that he could help her pass, if she helped him in return. That was the moment Alina learned what real danger looked like. She tried to distance herself. She avoided him, blocked his calls, pretended she didn't hear him when he visited the cafe. But Marcus was not a man who handled rejection with grace. His pride was a weapon sharper than any knife. Soon, she noticed a patrol car parked outside her street every other night. Her name appeared on a false complaint log. And one evening, a warning slipped beneath her door, a single sheet of paper with one sentence. "You're making a mistake you can't undo." But Marcus underestimated her. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was furious. The day everything changed was the day Marcus stormed into the cafe unannounced, bursting through the door with the authority of someone who believed no one could stop him. Customers shrank back. Her aunt froze behind the counter. Marcus cornered Alina, lowering his voice to what he thought was a seductive growl, but it carried the heavy stink of entitlement. "You think ignoring me makes you brave," he hissed. "But you don't understand how close you are to losing everything." Alina didn't tremble. Instead, she looked at him with the calmness of someone who had already made her decision. In her pocket was a tiny recording device she'd bought the night before. "You've already taken enough from me," she said, "but I'm done letting you take more." Marcus smirked, convinced she was bluffing. His hand brushed her arm, a touch she'd spent months running from. In that moment, the microphone caught everything, his tone, his threats, his confession that he could bury her dreams with a single signature. Alina walked away from him with the same steady breath she had walked in with, but inside, she felt something powerful. Control. It took her 3 weeks to gather more evidence. She tracked his past complaints, found victims too scared to speak, gathered files he thought had been deleted. Marcus had been playing this game for years, hiding behind charm badges and a carefully polished reputation. But he'd never crossed a girl who knew how to think like his worst nightmare. A girl who knew how to build a trap, slowly, quietly, perfectly. And the day that trap closed was the day an entire police station fell into stunned silence. Internal Affairs walked past Marcus in the middle of a morning briefing, placed a hand on his shoulder, and informed him he was under investigation. His smirk died instantly. His face drained. His ego cracked. But Alina wasn't there to see his world crumble. She didn't need to be. She knew the moment she signed the final statement that the inspector who once believed he owned her future had now lost his own. And as Marcus Hale was escorted down the hallway under the cold stare of officers who once admired him, a storm of whispers followed him. A storm he could not silence, control, or intimidate. Alina had taken his power and rewired it back to its rightful place. But she didn't celebrate, because she knew this was only the beginning. She didn't know that Marcus, even cornered, wasn't done fighting. She didn't know the truth that was about to surface, one that would tie her fate to his in ways she never imagined. She didn't know that destroying a man like him would unlock secrets darker than anything she had uncovered so far. And as she walked home that night, the city lights glimmering against the pavement, She felt a strange chill crawl up her spine. Something was coming. Something she had not prepared for. Something that would make her question everything she believed about justice, danger, and herself. Alina didn't look back as she crossed the dimly lit street, but faint uneasiness clung to her like the cool wind brushing against her jacket. The city felt different tonight. Too quiet in places that were usually alive, too watchful in corners where no one stood. She told herself it was just the aftershock of everything she had done. Bringing down a man with power was not something a person simply slept off. Yet some part of her felt the shift, the disturbance, the ominous weight that comes right before a storm tightens its fist. Her phone buzzed with messages from people congratulating her for stepping up. Anonymous voices online praising her courage. Former victims of Marcus sending trembling thank yous, admitting she had done what they couldn't. But none of it brought comfort. Every victory has an echo, and Alina feared the echo of this one might be louder than she expected. She reached her apartment building and climbed the stairs quietly. The hallway was almost too still. She slid her key into the lock, and before she could turn it, she noticed something off. Just slight enough to miss, just clear enough to gut her with dread. The doormat was crooked. She never left it that way. Her breath hitched. She stepped inside slowly, eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. Nothing was out of place. But that was the problem. Everything was too in place. Alina set down her bag and walked through each room, her heartbeat pounding louder than her footsteps. She reached her desk and froze. There, in the center, lay a single item she knew she hadn't left behind. A police badge. Marcus Hale's badge. Her stomach dropped. Her throat tightened. She reached out with a trembling hand, noticing a message etched on the metal with something sharp. "You didn't finish me." It wasn't possible. Marcus had been detained, his badge confiscated. He shouldn't be anywhere near her home, but the badge in front of her said otherwise. Or someone wanted her to believe he was free. She backed away, her hands shaking so badly she had to grip the chair to stabilize herself. Someone had been inside. Someone had watched her space, touched her things, left a taunt like a brand on her mind. Panic clawed at her chest, but she forced herself to breathe. Fear was what Marcus thrived on. If he was behind this, he wanted her to break. If it wasn't him, the situation was even worse. She stepped away from the desk and dialed internal affairs. But as the phone rang, a thought sank in. If Marcus wasn't supposed to have access to his badge, how did it end up on her desk? What if someone inside the department was helping him? Internal Affairs Officer Keene, a tired voice answered. Alina swallowed. "This is Alina Reed. I need to report break-in." She explained everything. Her doormat, the placement of the badge, the inscription. Officer Keene listened in silence, then said, "Ms. Reed, Inspector Hale is still in custody. The badge you found can't be his. His is locked in evidence." The room tilted slightly. She gripped the edge of the desk. "It's his badge. I know what it looks like. I saw it for months." "Maybe someone is trying to scare you," Keene suggested gently, "or send a message. But I can assure you, Hale is behind bars." The assurance did nothing. If anything, it worsened the knot tightening in her chest, because that meant the danger wasn't coming from the man she exposed. It was coming from someone else. Someone who didn't just want revenge, but wanted her silenced. "We'll send a unit to check the place," Keene said. "Stay outside until they arrive." Alina hung up and left the apartment, pacing across the hallway with shaky breaths. She looked down the staircase, and for a second, she swore she saw a figure leaning against the railing, watching. She blinked, and the figure was gone. When officers arrived, they combed through her apartment, questioned neighbors, checked the locks. Nothing showed signs of forced entry. Nothing was missing. The badge was collected as evidence. The officers left with a warning to stay alert and call if anything else happened. But deep down, she knew this wasn't over. The next morning, she didn't go to the cafe. Instead, she went straight to the police academy office to focus on her application. Training felt like the right step, power meeting power. Strength answering fear. She walked in confidently, but the receptionist, a middle-aged woman with soft eyes, froze when she saw her. "Ms. Reed," she said slowly. Someone's already been asking about you. Alina stiffened. Who? A man from the department, the woman whispered. Said he needed your file. Said it was urgent. Did you give it to him? Alina forced out. The woman looked torn. I shouldn't have, but he had identification. He said you were under review. The ground seemed to shift beneath her. Someone had her file, her address, her history, everything. Someone with access. Someone with authority. Someone who knew how to mimic Marcus Hale's shadow. She stepped back from the desk, feeling the walls closing in. She left the building quickly, almost stumbling as she reached the outside air. Her phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. You took someone powerful down. Did you think it would end there? Her fingers trembled as she tried to call back. The number was disconnected. Then another message appeared. Inspector Hale was never the real danger. You just stepped into a war you don't understand. Alina stood frozen on the sidewalk as people moved around her, unaware of the storm building at her feet. Someone was hunting her. And whoever they weren't doing it because of Marcus's ego or lust. They were doing it because Marcus was only the beginning, and she had accidentally uncovered something much darker than one corrupt officer. Something that wasn't going to let her walk away alive. The night Alina finally understood the truth was a night every illusion she held about justice shattered into pieces. She had spent weeks chasing shadows, dodging threats, and uncovering fragments of conspiracy that stretched far beyond Marcus Hale's corruption. She had believed he was the monster at the center of it all. But Marcus was only a pawn, a loud, arrogant, reckless piece in a game controlled by men who didn't need badges to command fear. Men whose power didn't come from uniforms, but from secrets. And Alina had touched one secret too many. The final message she received was a warning she couldn't ignore. It led her to the abandoned district near the port, where warehouses stood like skeletons against the dark horizon. The air smelled of metal and old betrayal. She walked carefully, every step echoing the weight of what she'd come to face. She didn't call for backup. She didn't tell her aunt where she was going. She came alone, because deep down she knew this confrontation wouldn't wait for permission or protection. This was her story, her fight, her reckoning. Inside the warehouse, only one light flickered. A chair sat in the center, and tied to it, bruised, defeated, and barely conscious, was Marcus Hale. The sight struck her like a blow. He lifted his head weakly, eyes widening with something close to shame. Or maybe relief. You shouldn't have come here, he rasped. Alina felt her pulse hammer. Who did this to you? He coughed, wincing. The same people you're trying to expose. The ones I work for, the ones who own half the city from behind locked office doors. His voice trembled. I thought I controlled them. Thought I could play by their rules and still walk away clean. But no one walks away clean. Alina's breath caught. She had suspected a network, but to hear Marcus admit it, here, beaten and chained, confirmed her worst fear. He lifted his eyes to her. For the first time, she didn't see arrogance. She saw a man who realized too late that he was not a predator, but prey. I crossed lines 'cause I thought it made me powerful, he whispered. But the truth is, I was nothing. And you, his voice cracked, you made them nervous. Alina stepped closer. Who are they? A voice answered from the shadows. The ones who built everything you believe in. She spun around. A man emerged, tall, composed, wearing a suit so perfectly tailored it looked like it was carved from darkness itself. His eyes were calm, like he had already calculated every outcome. And in that moment, Alina understood that real power didn't raise its voice. Real power didn't threaten. It simply existed and expected you to bow. You should have stayed a quiet girl, he said. You were never meant to be a problem. Alina held her ground. You're the one who broke into my home, who stole my file. He smiled faintly. I don't steal. I collect. She felt her chest tighten. And what exactly did you want to collect from me? Your silence, he replied. But you made it too complicated. Now, the only way to end this is to remove you. Marcus struggled against his restraints. Leave her out of it. She's done nothing. You were supposed to handle her. The man snapped. but your failures are no longer a concern. Alina stepped slightly in front of Marcus, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. You won't win. I've sent everything I had to a journalist. If I don't return home by morning, the story goes public. His smile vanished. Silence swallowed the room. Then, clever, he murmured, but unwise. The moment this becomes public, the city burns. Are you ready to carry that weight? Yes, she whispered. Because if the truth burns the city, at least it burns the right people. He studied her for a long, heavy moment. Then he turned his head slightly. Two men stepped out behind him, but before they reached her, a sound split the silence. Sirens. Dozens of them. The man's composure cracked for the first time. How? I didn't trust one journalist, Alina said softly. I trusted the entire city. Lights flooded the warehouse. Doors slammed open. Officers poured in, internal affairs, federal agents, even the police chief himself. The warehouse erupted into chaos. The men in suits tried to flee, but were tackled to ground. Marcus was freed from the chair. Collapsing as medics rushed to him. The man who threatened her stood frozen, surrounded on all sides. He straightened his suit, as if accepting a fate he never believed possible. This isn't victory, he warned her. This is war. Alina stepped forward, her voice steady as steel. Then I'll fight it. For a moment, their eyes locked, her defiance against his legacy of control. And then he was escorted away in handcuffs, his empire collapsing behind him. As dawn broke over the horizon, Alina stood outside the warehouse watching the city awaken. Marcus lay on a stretcher nearby, staring at her with something that resembled gratitude. You destroyed my career, he said weakly, but you saved my life. Alina lowered her gaze. You did both to yourself. I just refuse to let you drag others down with you. He closed his eyes, tears slipping free, maybe from pain, maybe from regret. Hours later, as reporters swarmed the scene and headlines erupted across the country, Alina walked away quietly. No fanfare, no applause. Just a girl who once lived a simple life, now carrying the weight of a truth bigger than anything she imagined. But she didn't walk away powerless. She walked away transformed. She had exposed a beast disguised as justice. She had broken a chain hundreds were afraid to touch. And though the battle ahead would be long, difficult, and full of scars, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had already won the part that mattered. She had refused to be silent. She had refused to bow. And in doing so, she had rewritten the ending of her own story.